Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're here today with probably the biggest advocate in the world right now for a diet that consists of meat, salt, and water, Dr. Anthony Chaffee. Doctor, thanks for coming. Would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you for having me. Well, my name is Dr. Anthony Chaffee. I'm an American medical doctor. I currently practice in Australia, and I've looked at diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease for a number of years. And I've come to realize that this is sort of the root cause of a lot of the ailments and conditions that we're treating now as a mainstay in modern medicine. About 90% of the so-called non-communicable chronic diseases, things like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, autoimmunity, mental health issues. This accounts for 90% of the issues that doctors treat nowadays, and 90% of the deaths in Western countries, and 75% of the deaths worldwide, which is pretty crazy to think about. You know, all the infectious disease, the wars, the famines, the infant mortality, all these other sorts of things. It only accounts for 26%. And so even worldwide, this is the major killer and the major problem. And I think that the vast majority of these things can be very easily addressed with diet and lifestyle interventions. And so that's something that I've been very vocal about. People eating a more biologically appropriate diet that suits our species so that we don't have these issues that come up from a lack of proper nutrition and eating things that don't actually do well in our system. So that's pretty much it. So I have a podcast and a YouTube channel that I talk about this, and I have a private medical practice where I see patients, and I practice what I preach. So I do this myself, and I advocate this for my patients, and I use it to reverse diseases that people even still consider irreversible: autoimmune issues, diabetes, mental health issues, and all these other sorts of hormonal issues. I've seen absolutely amazing things happen for people. And so I use that as a mainstay for my treatment at the moment as a doctor.
Awesome. What was the moment when the light bulb blinked in your head and you were like, the carnivore diet's the right diet, not only for me, but for everyone? I remember
Mhm.
mine, when I realized I got all the macro and micronutrients I needed in meat, I was like, well, that makes sense. Let me try that. And then I felt amazing. And I've been doing the carnivore diet for over 210 days right now.
Yeah,
And I don't want
nice.
to stop. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what was that moment for you?
I had inadvertently done a carnivore diet without even really realizing it in my early 20s. I just had a professor that, I'd taken botany and biology. I knew that plants defended themselves by making chemicals and toxins and poisons to stop animals from eating them. So I knew that they were toxic, but then you go home and you're told to eat your salad and your vegetables and things like that. And you forget what you learned in school that day with how that applies to real life. But I had a professor in cancer biology who really stressed this point that plants did not want you to eat them, that they were going to defend themselves. They make a million different defense chemicals, and most of these are actually quite noxious. They can even kill you. Most plants will kill you if ingested, and or at least hurt you very significantly, even in small doses. And we were going over this from a cancer perspective, and he was saying that things can actually be quite carcinogenic as well, and they have a lot of known carcinogens. And he said he didn't eat plants or vegetables, or wouldn't let his kids eat vegetables because, in his words, plants are trying to kill you. And so I was like, yep, right, not going to do that. So I stopped eating plants for about 5 years, but I didn't really think about it past myself. I was like, I'm just not going to eat that. I didn't try to push this on anybody. I didn't try to say, oh, don't you know that plants are trying to kill you, anything like that. I didn't say anything. I just was like, okay, great, I'm not going to eat that crap. And I just defaulted into eating meat and eggs, and that was it. And then because, it wasn't something that I had put too much more thought into other than that, it was something that I eventually slipped off of when I just didn't have the same access to meat. Sometimes the meat was breaded, and I was like, oh, well, maybe that's not that big of a deal. Dose makes the poison, and so maybe it's okay. It wasn't okay. It actually made a huge difference just having little crumbs on the meat. And I couldn't figure out why. I didn't feel as good as I normally did. I didn't put two and two together at the time. And it wasn't until about 7 years ago now that I came across Dr. Sean Baker on Joe Rogan's podcast, where he was talking about how you can get all your nutrients from meat, just like you were saying. And at first, when someone says that, I was like, "Oh, you can only eat meat and you don't need to eat anything else." It's like, well, that's ridiculous. And then something clicked in my head that said, "Well, in a second, I did that for 5 years, and those are the 5 years I've never felt better in my entire life." So, okay, well, maybe we'll take a look. And I didn't take vitamins. I didn't have bananas or anything like that. I just ate meat. And I thought about it. I was like, am I missing any vitamins here? And I thought, well, I feel good. My gums aren't bleeding. So, let's just ride this out. And that's what I did. And for 5 years, I didn't take any vitamins, didn't take any supplements, anything like that. I just said, okay, we'll see. And so I remember that. And I said, okay, well, I actually did that. And I probably should have gotten a serious vitamin deficiency if there was going to be one. And then I watched him, and it all made sense. I mean, I realized that he was really onto something. And in fact, I knew a lot of other research that really supported his arguments as well, like the plants being toxic, like the fact that cholesterol has been falsely vilified as something that was harmful for us, that sugar, fructose was likely the culprit instead of cholesterol, and that was but that the sugar companies vilified cholesterol to protect their investment in sugar. This is all a matter of record now. This is all published in the top medical journals. So I had known that already, and so when I saw Dr. Baker talking about this, it just clicked. And then I thought back even earlier in my education, which was in elementary school, when we learned that humans are apex predators, top of the food chain. Apex predators are, by definition, carnivores. I mean, that's what top of the food chain means. It means you eat all the animals below you, right? So what the hell is that? That's a carnivore, isn't it? That's something that eats meat. And so we were eating meat, and we've been eating meat for millions of years. And there's an immutable law of biology, which is that of adaptation. And so if whatever your species has been exposed to the longest, that's what you're most adapted to. And so that's what you're best suited for. And for us, that's meat. We haven't been eating plants in large quantities for millions of years. We and our ancestors, obviously Homo sapiens, have only been around 300,000 years. But the ancestors to Homo sapiens have been eating largely meat, or if not exclusively meat, especially during the ice ages, for at least 2 million years, 3 million years. And so that's what we're adapted to. We've only recently came back to eating plants. And so we've only had about 10,000 years eating any plants, and we're actually adding more and more in as we go. And now we're adding in all these processed foods and seed oils and massive amounts of sugar and all these things that we have absolutely not encountered in any great supply, if at all, throughout our biological past. And so it actually is very important. And so I saw that, and it just made sense. Just everything made sense. Why I felt so amazing in my early 20s made sense. And I said, right, I knew it. I knew plants were trying to kill me, get rid of these stupid things. And I did. And I just stopped eating vegetables. I was already just eating meat and salads, basically. And I just stopped eating the plants. I started eating a lot more meat, and it just dramatically changed my health for the better. And I felt so good that after 2 weeks, I went back and started playing high-level rugby. And I felt great doing it. I felt like I was 22 again. I was running, sprinting, running circles around a lot of people that had been training, the whole season. I was just coming in fresh mid-season, and was very out of shape. I'd just been doing humanitarian work in Bangladesh. There was definitely no exercise being done there. Eating whatever the hell was available to eat. And so it was really only just a couple of weeks on a carnivore diet, and I just felt so good that I was able to compete and feel great. And then I started thinking about things from the point of view of a doctor and just human health in general. And I realized that humans as a species are carnivores. That's what all the best evidence shows. No one has ever contested that up until like 2 years ago when these vegans are, oh no, actually we're herbivores. Like, are you out of your damn mind? Like what, based on what? Your ideology, the fact that you want to push an agenda, like that's it. There's no evidence that suggests otherwise. They just make things up. No serious evolutionary biologist would ever suggest that we're herbivores. no serious paleoanthropologist, archaeologist, or anthropologist has ever suggested that we're vegans or vegetarian or herbivores. I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. You can't even get basic complement of nutrients from plants. I mean, there's a ton that you can't get, but just B12, you can't get it, it's not going to happen. So obviously, you know, if you can't get it from nature, then it's not our natural diet. And so when I started looking at that and looking at human health from that perspective, that we're carnivores, but we're not eating as carnivores, all of these different idiopathic, non-communicable chronic diseases that we didn't know what they were caused by made sense. And it just started slotting into place all of these things. We just don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. So we'll treat the symptoms. We'll treat some problems. We'll spend $1 billion formulating a brand new novel drug that meets some little, you know, fixes on some certain receptors and transporters and changes something physiologically so that you can live with a disorder, with a disease, with a problem, as opposed to addressing the underlying cause. Oh, we just don't know what it is. So take this for the rest of your life and same. Well, it's not the same. It's very expensive. There's a lot of side effects, and you're not curing the problem. You're just papering over the symptoms. But this actually addresses the root cause, and so that made sense to me now. Okay, we're hurting ourselves. Animals get these problems too. Dogs and cats, domesticated pets, they get the same non-communicable chronic diseases that we get. We even have the same names for them, and they're treated the same way as well, symptomatically. And then we have, you know, signs of the zoos. They don't feed the animals. They get very sick if you feed them something they're not supposed to eat, or, you know, ducks at the pond or something like that. You know, just don't feed these animals. You make them sick. What do they get sick with? They get all the non-communicable chronic diseases that we get. And so it just made sense. You know, you're supposed to eat what your species is designed to eat. Our species is designed to eat meat. Since we started making that argument, when the vegans started saying, no, actually we're herbivores and we're designed to eat plants. And like, it's never, ever even been a contention. So they're just scrambling for ground here. But no, that's when that hit me, and it just made sense. And then I started digging into the research and the literature and seeing, you know, what do we know, what can we prove? And there's actually a ton of evidence. You know, there are the most robustly studied diet in human history is an animal-based, whole food, animal-based ketogenic diet. The ketogenic diet's in general the most heavily studied diet ever. And it's the only diet that's ever been studied in such a robust nature. There are thousands of randomized controlled trials on ketogenic diets. Ketogenic diets, you take away carbohydrates. Well, what do you replace it with? Fat and protein. Where do you get the fat and protein? Generally from meat. And so the studies that do that strip down under 20 grams of carbohydrates or even zero carbohydrates and use animal fats and animal protein to replace the carbohydrates. Those studies show significant improvement in humans and animals. And then you'll see dishonest, if I can put it mildly, studies that claim to be studying a ketogenic diet, and technically they do. They'll say, okay, well, it's ketogenic. We measured ketones maybe in animals, in mice, and in fact, there was some sort of problem, and they had some deleterious outcome that we considered negative. Okay, and then how were they kept in ketosis? What was the fat source? They gave them Crisco, hydrogenated vegetable oil, which a lot of people say, oh, well, this stuff is toxic. It was invented by the Germans to lubricate their war machines and U-boats and tanks and things like that. And Procter & Gamble bought it. Procter & Gamble? I believe Procter & Gamble bought it in 1911. And then paid the American Heart Association the equivalent of $20 million to lie and say that it was better for your heart than butter and lard and things like that. So, and then other ones will be like, well, this is a low carb diet. And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? It's like, oh yeah, they'll have like 200 grams of carbs a day. Like, well, okay, you know, that may be lower than 300, but it's certainly not what I would consider low carb, and it's certainly not ketogenic. And so, you know, when those studies, you know, they say like, oh yeah, these low carb diets, they're no good. It's like, well, that's not a low carb diet. You know, that's certainly not a ketogenic diet. But the ones that are actually ketogenic and use animal fat and protein to replace carbohydrates, those ones show improvement for multiple significant health parameters for specific medical endpoints. There is no other diet that has ever been studied in that robust nature in an experimental fashion. I saw some vegan lady claim that the vegetarian diet, vegan diet, actually made the exact same claims but about a vegetarian vegan diet. Complete and utter fiction. There are nothing near the amount of experimental trials in plant-based diets as there are in animal-based ketogenic diets. Not even close. And in fact, the vast majority of studies on plant-based diets are epidemiological survey studies. They gave nutritional surveys to people and say, hey, what'd you eat last year? Yeah, like as if you're going to remember every meal you had in a calendar year or longer. And that's what they're trying to say is, oh, this is really good science. It's not even science. It's propaganda, and it's manipulated data to try to push an agenda. But the real experimental data shows that animal-based diets, whole food, animal-based ketogenic diets, like a carnivore diet, which is an animal-based ketogenic diet, whole food, is extremely beneficial, specifically for all these non-communicable chronic diseases that we treat as a mainstay of medicine. So it is vitally important that this gets out there. Unfortunately, there's no big food company or pharmaceutical company behind this pushing it because they're making billions of dollars off a ketogenic carnivore diet. It's a grassroots movement. And so this isn't taught in medical schools. It's not taught in residency programs because the medical schools and residency programs the curriculum is largely dictated by the big industrial companies, the food companies, the drug companies, and the professors. Doctors are not being taught by doctors. Doctors are being taught by doctors who are being paid by big food and big pharmacy. And so it's very corrupt, unfortunately. And so we have to do this as a grassroots movement and just get people healthy on our own. Unfortunately, it would be nice if we could just make this say, hey, look, this is actually a good recommendation for people to do. Some places are. Australia, I'll end here. I know I've been rambling. Australia just recently named ketogenic diets, animal-based ketogenic diets, as the best practice for treating diabetes in Australia. And that was hard fought. There's a guy named Dr. James Mukey who really, really pushed hard for that. And there was a couple people on the panel against him who were really fighting tooth and nail to not let this be included. But he stuck to his guns and he wouldn't let up, and he was able to get it through. Were those people being paid by the food and drug companies? Most of these people do have conflicts. I don't know if those individuals did, but they really fought against it. So it was hard for him to get on it, but he was in a position because he was named Australian of the Year in 2020, which is a big honor for his work in actually ophthalmology and his research and charity that he set up. And so they said, hey, do you want to be on this board? It was sort of an honorary thing because, hey, you're Australian of the Year, all that sort of stuff. He doesn't treat diabetes except for diabetic retinopathy, but he knew about the ketogenic diets and how helpful it was for diabetes and diabetic retinopathy, things like that. And so he just really pushed for it, and now it's in there. So we're making some headway, even from an official capacity, but largely this is just grassroots. But the data is there. The studies are there. It's just they're not being propagated by drug reps and residency programs and medical schools. So that's something we have to do ourselves. We have to distribute this between doctors, clinicians, and patients as well. So that's what I'm trying to do.
And I don't see, I think that people don't know about that really, because I reposted one of your videos. I put some captions in Portuguese about how Chris Palmer from Harvard is using ketogenic diets to treat depression, OCD, ADHD, whatever it is. The video has over 500,000 views on Instagram.
Yeah. Nice.
And people are sharing over 18,000 shares. So I don't think people know about that. And that's what I'm trying to do as well, trying to push this. I'm not even a doctor. I'm just a mechanical engineer. But I do like things that make sense. I do like to make study decisions. And when I saw that the carnivore diet could be and I think it is the biological appropriate diet for us, then I was like, I'm going all in on this, and people have to know about this. I've actually made the calculation that you mentioned about evolution. We've been eating meat, predominantly meat, for over 300,000 years, just 300,000 years as Homo sapiens sapiens. Those 10,000 years that we've been not eating meat on the agricultural revolution, that's 0.03% of our life as Homo sapiens sapiens, 0.03. And I don't see how people don't think that this is enough. I don't see how people think this is enough for it to make a change in our for us to adapt for a I don't know, plant-based diet. We can see that our stomachs have pH that can handle meat, right? We can see that our appendix is not that big. It's actually very, very small when compared to any animals that eat predominantly meat. So, and I'm sure there are many other many other characteristics in our body that tells us that we've been eating meat for a long time. But what would you say, Dr. Chaffee, to those people that say that a balanced diet is important after all of that you talked right now?
Yeah. Well, the immediate follow-up I always have is, a balance of what? Right? I mean, what are we looking at? It has to be a balance of meat and balance of vegetables and a balance of grain. Well, that doesn't make sense. A balance of nutrients. You need the right balance of nutrients. You need essential nutrients in the right balance. You need essential amino acids. And actually, inessential amino acids are actually beneficial as well in the right proportion. So it's not enough to just have, the essential amino acids. You have to have them in the right amounts, because every single molecule that our DNA codes for is a protein and is strings of amino acids that then get, changed and modified and folded in different ways, or they add, different sorts of carbohydrates and different groups or whatever onto, or lipids. But the base string is amino acids. This is a protein. Okay. And so if you're making a lot of proteins, right, and the proteins that you're making are 13% leucine, and you have all these, all the complete, proteins and everything like that, but you don't have 13% leucine, you only have 7% leucine. You don't just make, they don't just figure it out and put something else in there. That stops. If they don't have enough substrate, they can't continue making that protein. It just stops. The mechanism stops. And so it's a molecular mechanism, but it's growing, it's bang, 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 and it just stops because it doesn't have substrate. So it doesn't go anywhere. So that shuts down production. It shuts down protein synthesis, and your body doesn't work properly. Your cells don't work properly. So you need these things in balance. So you have to ask them, well, what do you mean by balance? Oh, you need a balance. Oh, you need to eat the rainbow. We need a balance of colors. I mean, what nutrient is purple? Oh, I'm feeling a little low on orange today. Oh, I really need some yellow. And I'm feeling definitely yellowy. I need some more yellow. It's just an absurd thing to say that you need a color. There are different things and different nutrients and different toxins that have the same color. So that's a silly thing to say, that you just need to eat a lot of colors. That doesn't make any damn sense. You need nutrients. And so you need a balance of nutrients. And where do you get that? You get that from a steak. A steak is a perfect balance of the vitamins and minerals, essential fatty acids, essential proteins that you have to have. And in fact, some of the quote unquote non-essential amino acids, which are actually conditionally required and essential, because carnitine is not considered an essential amino acid, and it's an amino acid that only exists in meat. And so the plant-based people will say, well, you can get a full complement of amino acids in plants. And it's just like, well, some people can, but only 70% of people make enough carnitine. And even they do better with more dietary carnitine for a number of different reasons. Taurine,
Creatine as well, right?
And creatine as well. Yeah, absolutely. And creatine, yeah, is really just in meat predominantly, and especially red meat. There's a lot of it. And so especially carnitine only 70% of people make enough carnitine. Fully 30%, a third of the planet, doesn't make enough carnitine. It has to get it from a dietary source. It only exists in meat. So meat is a balanced diet. I guess you could have a balance of good things and balance of bad things. That's a balance, right? Because if it's all good things, then obviously that's off balance, and that just falls down. So you want a balance of plant toxins and poisons that hurt you, and a bunch of and a balance of nutrients that are good for you. I guess that's a balance. So what balance are we looking for? A balance of nutrients. And that's what meat is. Fatty meat has a perfect balance of all the nutrients that are essential for life and nothing else. And that's the important thing, because plants, of course, do have nutrients, but they come along with anti-nutrients. They come along with toxins. They come along with things that can be harmful to us. And so that's the thing. You get the bad with the good. And also there's the issue with bioavailability and all these other sorts of things. So when people really say, well, you need a balance, you just need to eat sort of everything, what that means is they have no idea what we actually require, and they're just guessing, and they just want to cover their bases. And that's fair enough. You just want to do the best you can and at least cover your bases and at least cover the essential nutrients. And that would be fine if there weren't any harmful substances that came along with plants and grains and seeds and nuts and things like that. But there are. There's actually, again, there's a million different chemicals that the plant kingdom makes in order to defend themselves and stop animals from eating them. So it's not benign. It's not a benign prospect to just eat everything and just make sure you're getting all the nutrients. First of all, you get all the nutrients you need from eating meat and a bit of organs every now and then, for some people that need a bit more. You don't get all of that from plants, and you don't need plants. There's nothing that exists in plants that you have to have that you cannot get from meat. But there are things in meat that you have to have that you cannot get from plants. You can get everything you need from meat and a bit of organs. Not everyone needs organs, but some people do better with them. Same cannot be said about plants, and you don't have to have them, and they come with harmful things. So you're saying, oh, you need a balanced diet, you need a balance of everything, a balanced plate. Really, where that comes from is the food companies. They were saying that, so you just buy more of their crap. That didn't actually come from serious scientists who had any sort of experimental data to show that this was the right thing to do. This came from people trying to sell you something, and those are the origins of most of these recommendations, is people trying to sell you something. And so if you say, well, you have to have a balance of everything, that means that you don't actually know what human beings require and what's optimal for us. Well, I'm here to tell you what's optimal for us. What's optimal for us is what we've been eating since time immemorial, and have been eating exclusively or near exclusively with amazing health benefits and results for millions of years, and that's meat. Meat is not harmful to any animal on earth. There is nothing on earth that is harmed by eating meat that I know of. I've never heard of anything. Even herbivores, 70% of animal species are carnivores. They just eat meat. And then, or a mixture of meat, and maybe they'll eat some plants and things like that opportunistically, or if they have to, like a bear or something like that. But if they get meat, if they have meat, they'll take meat. But even herbivores will opportunistically eat animals that are smaller than them if they can. Just go on YouTube and look up, deer eats bunny, things like that. I mean, there's some crazy videos out there of deer and elk and horses and cows just munching up little ducklings and chickens in a farmyard, or chicks in a farmyard. And I saw one, it was a cow elk that was just like chewing on a bunny, and it had its bottom legs were hanging down. It was just obviously dead, and it was just chewing this thing like it was chewing cud, and it was just chewing this thing, and the bunny is just, legs are just flapping around. And it was pretty disturbing watching this, because they didn't have the right teeth, so they're not able to really take this thing down. And the male elk, the bull, was just looking at it just like you could see the look of shock on this elk's face. It was just like, what the hell are you doing? And the female was just like munching around. It's just like, yeah, this is good. So they will do this, meat is not bad for anything. It doesn't have to be. There are poisonous toads and things that have poison sacs and venom and things like that because they're generally smaller and they need to, defend themselves against bigger animals. But the meat itself isn't bad. It's not just, oh my God, cholesterol, oh God, fat. No, animals pursue fat in the wild. Humans pursue fat in the wild. Look at Inuits. They get about 50% of the weight of their food is fat, which is like 3 or 4 grams of fat to 1 gram of proteins. A massively high fat diet. They're skinny, they're healthy, they don't have the diseases of civilization until they started being incorporated into Western society and eating Western food and smoking. They actually start smoking at a very young age, some as young as 8 in some communities, on average as low as 8. I mean, it's a very, very high smoking rate. I could go on about that, but they've been significantly hurt. These native populations that were traditionally carnivorous, like the Inuit, like the Plains Indians in America, like the Australian Aboriginals, they were largely carnivorous unless they, certain areas that had agriculture, not the Inuit, but some Native Americans, but not really in the Great Plains where they were hunting bison, and most of Australia were still hunting. And when they switched over
as well.
Sorry?
Then the nets as well in Russia up to today, they still eat a carnivorous diet.
Yeah. And the Mongolians out in the country, still sort of living in a more traditional fashion as well. And it's not until they started getting incorporated into Western society and started eating Western food that they started seeing these extremely serious deleterious health effects. Anthropologists talk about this, that when you have a primitive population that is eating traditionally, they have certain health issues that they have to contend with: injury, infectious disease, childbirth and delivery, and kids getting eaten and killed by something, those sorts of things. And then when they start getting incorporated into society, they start becoming more civilized. How civilized is civilization? Probably not all that much, but you start seeing a shift in the pattern of the health issues that they have to contend with, and they start getting the diseases of civilization, the non-communicable chronic diseases that we are now understanding are attributable to the Western diet, the post-agrarian diet, and now specifically it's been completely it's been put into overdrive and supercharged for the whole processed food industry and that whole mess, and that's made things even worse. And so now you're dumping these people who aren't even able to deal with grains or lettuce, and now you're dumping in ultra processed food as well, and they just don't have the machinery to contend with this. We don't either. Even our ancestors who have had agriculture for about 10,000 years, it's only 10,000 years, like you said, it's 0.03% of Homo sapiens existence. Like, it's nothing. It's certainly not enough. In the last 100 years with the ultra processed food, that's nothing at all. And you've seen a massive decline in the height and health of the native populations within the last century. We saw this in real time in the last century or two, depending on when they sort of got put on reservations and forced to eat more Western food. And the fossil record is clear as well. Going back 10,000 years ago, the same thing. They drop by 5 inches on average. Brain shrinks by about 11% on average for men, 17% for women. Their jaws get smaller, teeth get more crowded, they get more signs of infectious disease, poor wound healing, tuberculosis in their spines, which is not seen before that. And so that happened at every time and every place that agriculture was transitioned into. And it, regardless of the time, regardless of location, regardless of the people, and regardless of the type of crop that they changed to, the same pattern emerged. The height and health of the people declined. And we saw this in real time with the native populations that we just talked about in the last 200 years. There was a paper that came out in 2001 that looked at some early anthropological work in the late 1800s in America with the Plains Indians, the Native Americans in the Great Plains had traditionally been eating a lot of bison and American buffalo, and they would traditionally eat this the year round, and then in the 1800s, Buffalo Bill, and the army was going around just slaughtering all the buffalo to wipe out the food supply. I mean, that's what you do in a war. You knock out the food supply of the enemy, and you typically win after that. Horrible thing to do, both for just in general, but also for the natural world. It really took something out of the world by doing that. But they did it. And so they looked at that, and I believe the Cheyenne were the tallest. And they found that they were the tallest population of human beings alive on Earth at the time. But the kicker was that the Cheyenne, who were on average 5'10", adult male height, which is pretty damn tall for the 1800s. Now you think, oh, okay, well, places like Denmark and these sorts of places, maybe there would be around 5'10", 6 foot, things like that. So you'd have sort of similar, and it depends. There's all depending on the sources you look at, they have very different average heights for America. Like I've seen for Americans, adult male height, I've seen it 5'8", and I've seen it 5'10". So you have to. You have to sort of take all of these things with a grain of salt. But okay, so it's about maybe what like a really good, healthy society would be now, right? Well-fed, healthy society would be now, which is already saying something. The average height of a population denotes the average health of a population. So when you see the height dramatically drop, obviously they got less healthy. So Cheyenne, on average, 5'10" in the late 1800s. But here's the kicker. They were already on reservations by the time they were studied. They were already displaced off their land and not eating their traditional carnivorous diet of bison. And so in those records, they even said, we have shrunk. We're normally much taller. Our fathers, our grandfathers were much taller, and they had older generations that were taller as well. And so that brought down the average. And so they said that if they studied this 100 years earlier, in the early 1800s or late 1700s, they probably would have found they were much taller than that. And in fact, if you look at paintings, there was a gentleman, I forget his name, but he went into the Great Lakes and the Great Plains in America in the 1700s, late 1700s, early 1800s, and he painted these people, and they were like, oh, look at these natives. They have such small heads, obviously a small brain, and this, that, and the other. And they was like, no, hold on a second, and look at it in scale. They found that these guys actually had huge heads. It's just they were nearly 7 feet tall. And so the scale was off. Yeah. And so these guys were massive. There's a delegation that came and visited then President Thomas Jefferson. And he was a tall guy. He was like 6'2", 6'2.5", something like that. He was one of the taller presidents, and especially for the time. And he was a big guy. Obviously he's wealthy and he had access to meat. So there you go. But these delegates came and met him from the Great Plains, from the Great Lakes area, and he said that they were absolute giants. These guys just towered over him and everybody else. And so again, these guys were probably 6'9", 6'10", just big, tall guys. And then they shrink down to about 5'10". You look at the fossil record of the people who were hunting mammoths during the ice ages. These guys were freaking giants, depending on where. They ranged on average from 5'10" to 6'4". Average adult male height, 6'4", right? I saw this in my own family. I'm not a small guy, but I didn't grow to my genetic potential. None of us did. Because our parents weren't carnivore before conception, and our mothers weren't carnivore during pregnancy and breastfeeding. We weren't raised as carnivores. So we're not going to develop to our genetic potential. My father's father, he had 5 brothers. They were all around 6'9", 6'10". They were all nearly 7-footers, and they were all born in the early 1900s. Right? They lived through the Great Depression, and these are just tall bastards. And there was 5 of them, and they all played basketball. So they had their own like team, and they're just, just dunking on people and everything, just slamming it. And they grew up playing together, so they could just take out anybody. But then my father and his siblings, they're between 6'4" and 6'7", so already several inches reduced. And then myself and my brothers, we're between 5'10" and 6'4". So I have a younger brother that's 5'10", I'm 6'3", my brother's 6'4". So again, we're coming down. We should be going up. We should be in times of plenty and having more access to food, and we do. It's just the wrong food. And so if you're not getting proper nutrition and you're eating things that are deleterious to your health and your development, you're not going to develop to your genetic potential. And so we're seeing these non-communicable chronic diseases happen younger and younger and younger. People are having heart attacks in their teens and 20s. Like, what the hell is that coming from? And
kids are obese right now. They have diabetes as well, which is mind-blowing.
It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. The autism rates are through the roof. We look at the 1970s, autism rates were very low, and then it started increasing. And so, well, maybe it was just a diagnostic issue. We got better at diagnosing things. Okay, you can say that once, and they said that in the 90s, but every decade it has increased more and more and more. So, explain that one, because, we said, okay, we should really be paying attention now. And so we did. And then it went up and it went up and it went up. But here's the real thing. People in their 70s alive today, the rate of autism of people in their 70s is 1 in 10,000. The rate of autism in the new generation coming up now is 1 in 35 and 1 in 22 males. So you have older people, and it's 1 in 10,000. And so is that a diagnostic issue? Well, why is that? Why weren't they diagnosed late as having autism? This is a very serious developmental issue, and it's getting out of control. And
it happens fast, right?
Say again?
It happens fast. So in a couple of generations, we can already see the degradation of whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because we've doubled down. We've been saying that meat's really bad. Okay, so they said meat's bad, plants are good, ultra-processed foods, well, that's just plants, so that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. You get all the food companies pumping out a bunch of their own industry research to say that all these artificial sweeteners and ingredients and ultra-processed foods and sugars and all these things are safe. They're not a big deal. It's not bad.
As long as you eat within the calories, right?
Well, yeah. Well, and then on these fake ingredients, they don't even have calories, like the fake sugars and sweeteners and things like that. And then they pay off people, unscrupulous, shills that have no souls and no moral ethics. And the doctors doing this, and they should probably lose their license for doing this. I
have a question for you, Dr. Chaffee, regarding this.
Stuff. Yeah.
So, I like on Instagram, sometimes I go and look at some nutritionists' pages, or they go on my For You page on my Instagram, because I like to see what's going on around me here in Brazil, at least. Some of those guys have over 1 million followers, 2 million followers on Instagram. So they're considerably big, got a bunch of followers, and I see they telling people it's okay to drink Coke Zero, it's sugar, etc., as long as it fits their calories, and then they can make a flexible diet, a plan for them so they can lose weight, eating whatever they want. And I got 2 questions for you regarding this specific topic. I'll ask you the first one, let you answer it, and then ask the second one. Sounds good? Like, what would you say to those nutritionists? Because in my mind, it doesn't make sense, right? They're nutritionists, so they should tell people to eat nutritious foods, like. But there they are on Instagram. Yeah, it's in their name. But there they are telling, oh, it's okay to eat this Nutella bar because it only has 150 calories. So eat one a day, you should be good. What would you say to those guys?
Well, I mean but you're right. I mean that's those are two different arguments. Are we arguing for what's optimal nutrition, or are you arguing what can you get away with? If you're a nutritionist, why are you arguing for things that are deplete in nutrients? And you say, oh well, you can do it. I mean, calories are not the nutrient we should be looking at. There's macros and micros and all these other sorts of things. These actual nutrients that are important. And so if you're just looking at calories and that's the only thing you're looking at, you are missing the point. The point is nutrients. Your body tracks nutrients. It does not track calories. You have sensors in your stomach that track up the vagus nerve to your brain and tell your brain how many nutrients are in your stomach, not how many calories are in your stomach. And so if you eat all of this stuff that tastes good, has an addictive nature, and is designed to have an addictive nature, food scientists fully admit this. There was a 60 Minutes program where they interviewed some food scientists, and they said, yes, what we want to do is we want to take these flavors, have this big initial burst of flavor. So we change the chemicals around to have this big initial flavor, and then it goes away quickly. So you want the next chip and the next piece and the next candy and the next one and the next one and the next one. So you get sort of compulsive, addictive eating, and so you just keep eating more and more and more and more. So you're eating this stuff. You're getting a compulsion to eat it. It gets in your stomach, and your stomach says, there's no nutrients here, keep going. You need actual food. And so, that's cute and all to say that, oh, well, it's just calories in, calories out. First of all, no, it's not. That's completely reductionist and wrong. But these things, that assumes that these things are not addictive and they're not designed to be eaten compulsively. And some people can do that. Some people can just say, no, I'm just going to have that and that's it. I'm sure there are people out there that just do one line of Coke a day and that's it. And that's good for them. And they never change and they never deviate. They never go to 2 lines or 10 bags. That's it. It's just 1 line a day. That's all they do. Those people probably exist. The vast majority of people, not a chance in hell. And so these things are designed to be addictive. They're designed to make you overeat because they want to sell a product. And calories are not nutrients. So where do you get off as a nutritionist suggesting a diet or suggesting a food that is devoid of nutrients? Sure, you can starve yourself into a smaller dress size. People do it all the time. That doesn't mean that that's sustainable. It doesn't mean that that's good for you. And people in Auschwitz lost a lot of weight too, being starved by the Nazis in concentration camps. Does not mean that that's good for them. Does not mean that that was a positive outcome. So just because you can lose weight and body fat does not mean that that's a healthy diet and something that's sustainable long term. And so you can starve yourself, but eventually you have to stop starving yourself because you actually need nutrients or you're going to die. And some of these things come with anti-nutrients, some of these things come with toxins, and they're causing harm all the time. So you're going to get sick. And then you're going to go back and you're going to start eating something else. You're going to go outside of that calorie balance. And because you have horrible eating habits, because some idiot told you to eat Nutella every day, now you're going to eat a lot of Nutella every day. And you're going to eat a lot more of it, and then you're going to put on the weight and all these sorts of things. And the thing is, too, that's important to remember is that you can lose weight, but is that the objective? No. The objective is to retain lean body mass or even improve lean body mass and lose excess body fat, not weight. Because you can put on lean body mass and lose fat and stay the same weight or even gain weight. So what happens in a lot of these starvation diets, the low-fat diet, the calorie-restricted diet, they will lose weight. But the weight they lose is a combination of fat and lean body mass. The ketogenic diets, and ketogenic diets have been tried against the low-carb diets have been tried against the low-fat diets, and the ones that are statistically significant, there's over 30 of them, randomized controlled trials. Every single one showed that the low carbohydrate diets beat the low fat diets. And what's more important is that you didn't lose muscle and lean body mass on the ketogenic diets. You only lost fat, and you lost more weight just by losing fat. Whereas in the low fat diets, the calorie restriction diets, you lost not as much weight, and only some of that was fat. The rest of it was lean body mass, which is very deleterious to your health. So it is far more complicated than calories in, calorie out. Just to touch briefly on calories in, calories out, and what an absurd notion that is. First of all, calories don't weigh anything, right? It's a unit of heat energy. So you say that, well, you have more calories or less calories. Okay, well, a glass of cold water and a glass of warm water, the warm glass of water has more calories. So does that weigh more than the cold glass of water? Is that going to make you put on weight by eating it? No, of course not. That's ridiculous. It weighs the same amount. Calories are heat energy. A calorie is not a calorie is not a calorie. Our bodies are not combustion engines. Calories are when you burn something, it releases heat, and that's a calorie. Oh, that's what goes in your body. No, that's not what goes in your body. That's not the energy that we use. We're not a combustion engine. We're not a steam locomotive. We're a chemical factory, and we put things in our bodies. We put chemicals in our bodies. They have chemical interactions and reactions, and that is what provides chemical energy and ATP, but maybe not. Only some things provide ATP. Other things are used as building blocks. Protein, like we said, every single molecule in your body that is made by your DNA starts off as a protein backbone. Those are amino acids. So you're eating proteins that gets used. Those amino acids get used in the proteins that your body makes. Not just building muscle, but every single molecule that your body makes, that your DNA makes, it's made out of amino acids. So you're eating all the calories in protein. You don't use those as calories. You don't use those as energy. You use a small proportion of those as energy. So you're taking in a lot of calories, but you don't use them as energy. So that's useless. And then carbohydrates get used very differently. They have different hormonal effects. These are all very complex organic molecules that have different complex chemical interactions in your body. They have different hormonal reactions in your body. Carbohydrates will raise blood sugar. They'll raise insulin. Insulin is a very important hormone that affects over 100 different mechanisms in your body. And when that elevates, that gets everything out of balance. And then fructose has its own independent hormonal interactions. It will raise insulin, but it will also block leptin, which is a satiety hormone. It will upregulate ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, and tells your body to start eating. And it gets metabolized into fat in your liver, causes fatty liver disease, all these other sorts of things. And then the fats too. Fats all behave differently as well. So you cannot reduce the importance and the actions of these chemicals in your body down to how much heat escapes when you burn it. That's insane. And again, calories don't weigh anything. Right? So if you really want to think about this properly, you're saying that, well, you don't want to eat fat because it has so many calories. Oh my God. So what? The calories don't weigh anything, right? Matter weighs things. Atom weighs things. Grams, that's a measure of weight, right? So they say don't eat fat because it's so calorie dense, right? So many damn calories. So there's 9 calories per 1 gram of fat, and there's only 4 calories
Right.
per 1 gram of carbs and protein, right? Except when, again, you don't use protein typically as energy. You have to convert that. You have to take off the nitrogen group and convert that into glucose and then use that as energy. And that's energy dependent. And so at the end of the day, in balance, you only get about 3.4 calories per gram of protein. Okay, so calories don't weigh anything, right? So what does weigh something in that equation? It's the grams, right? So that's what we need to look at. So flip the equation around. It's 1 gram per 9 calories of fat, 2.2 grams per 9 calories of carbs, and actually 3 grams of protein per 9 calories of protein, right? So what weighs more, right? Where do you want to get your energy from? In fact, you want to eat the fat because it weighs less. You get more energy for less weight. And so if you want to lose weight, you want to bring in less atoms. How do you lose weight? Where does the weight go? Doesn't escape as heat. Heat is energy, right? Matter has to escape. You breathe out CO2. That's these carbons that are coming out, that are coming off of the food that we eat, the sugars and the proteins and the fats that we're having. You're actually breathing off these atoms, and that's actually one of the ways you lose weight. sweat and defecate, urinate, all these other sorts of things as well. But that's how it is. You actually physically have to lose matter in order to lose weight. It's not heat. It's not the energy. It's the weight. It's the matter of grams. And so you get less grams per unit of energy if you get fat. So in fact, if you get the majority of your calories from fat, you will actually take in less food. And so you'll take in less food by weight. And in fact, a colleague of mine, Dr. Michael Eads, made this point, which I think is an excellent point, at a conference in San Diego last year, which I'll be going to in August this year if people are going to that, the Symposium for Metabolic Health. And he pointed out, and he did the calculations, and he said if you just eat a typical 2,000 calorie diet, but you do it with 70% calories from fat, you'll actually take in two less, I forget if it was pounds or kilos, probably kilos, two less pounds or kilos, whatever it was, per week. And he said that actually typically lines up with how much weight loss people get on ketogenic diets. They generally lose on average about 2 pounds or kilos a week on these diets. So that's the important thing there is you want to lose weight, okay, then eat less, but eat less matter, right? Not less calories. You want the calories. You want the nutrients. So you eat nutrient-dense, calorie-dense food because it weighs less. That's what you do.